You're listening to the Energy is Love podcast.
Okay.
We're starting. Push start. Push play. Did you push play on this episode already?
I literally just looked at my phone. I thought you were talking to me, and I'm like, did I?
Did I
push play?
start?
Let's see this. You know what I forgot to do?
What?
Before we started recording?
What did you forget?
I forgot to pop the top
You forgot to open up your...
of my...
This episode is brought to you by Dr. Pepper's newest flavor.
Wouldn't it be cool?
Strawberries and cream.
Okay, I just had to try it because...
Get yours at any local Piggly Wiggly.
It's so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is my... What? You're laughing.
I'm not
It's
laughing.
my 12-pack allowance. Oh, I thought you grabbed a LaCroix. We are cheersing it up with the
Yes.
strawberries and cream Dr. Peppers.
Living the high life.
We are. It's good. You got to try it. You got to try
Nothing
it.
but class around here.
Right?
I've been waiting.
Class, grass, and ass. Here we go.
I've been
kidding.
waiting to share with you something. I listened to this podcast recently.
I'm so excited.
I want to make sure that I get the name of the podcast right.
I love that you do that. I'm like,
One of our daughters turned me on to it. It's pretty good. So the podcast is called Unexplainable. And they're short episodes, sometimes, 20, 30 minutes long, covering all sorts of different really cool stuff. This episode that I just listened to was about water,
yeah.
right? And how did this planet that we're on right now, currently, right, in this present moment, how did this planet get its water?
How did it?
Do you have any ideas? Any theories? Because that's the truth of it, right? It's all just theories. Yeah, nobody knows.
On how an atmosphere was created and
Right.
how all that.
Do you have any theories?
I don't.
Have you ever heard any theories in regards to how the water got here?
Honestly, I want to say yeah, I do. I've got theories. I've got smart thoughts in my head, but I can't think of any right now.
Yeah.
I can think of smart thoughts in my head. I just can't think of any of how I don't know. I think it's just been water exists here, and water is how we have life. And because water doesn't exist on other planets is why they don't have life. That's all you've heard. Obviously, I know that's not true.
Right.
But that's as far as it's gone. So I didn't why does this planet have water?
Yeah.
Or
where did it come from?
Where did it come from?
Mm-hmm. Because the idea is
When two snowflakes fall in love.
when a mama snowflake and a dada snowflake, they get together.
And
Anyways,
then-
there's this was just a really fascinating episode, and I wanted to share it with you because I thought you would be like, oh my gosh.
I'm excited to hear. I know the God theory with water.
The God theory?
That God is water. There's a whole thing on that.
Okay, maybe we'll go to that after this.
But it's not how did water get here?
So on this episode, they interviewed some Scottish, I think, scientist lady. Where's not Gloucester? Wow. Glasgow.
It's in Scotland.
Scotland, right? That's where the girls went, isn't it? Anyways, they interview this lady, and there's two thought processes or two theories as far as how the water got here. Because the idea is that billions of years ago, right, when our planet's formed, it's just all these stuff, basically rocks and minerals and everything that come together.
Don't comets have ice crystals in them?
That's one theory,
right?
But the whole idea is that when the planet was originally formed, basically it was too hot. It's just a ball of lava, magma, hotness.
Too hot.
Right? And then that eventually cools, and then eventually somehow water magically appears here.
Oh, I have so it's the asteroid, the comet that came in, this massive that hit, filled it with water, and then the steam effect is what created the atmosphere, the ozone. So it's why we have the precipitation cycle.
Could be.
Boom.
All theories, right?
Follow stuff.
So it's
for
stuff
science.
like the water came from comets or asteroids, right? Because there's big asteroids that have frozen water on it and everything like that. So that's one theory.
Yeah. Where do they get their water from?
There's another crazy theory.
What is it?
Where it's
is it flat Earth crazy?
Hold on.
It's okay if you like flat Earth.
I'm going to butcher it, but think of our solar system, and the sun is obviously the biggest thing, and the sun is everything's being pulled towards the sun because of gravity.
Gravity pull.
And so you've got, I can't remember if it's Jupiter or It's not Mars, I know that. Some planet on the outskirts of our
Okay.
solar system started to get pulled towards the sun.
Okay.
This one I'm not going to do a good job of explaining. Anyways, there's another theory that involves like planets moving because of gravitational pull towards the sun, and then
Like orbit?
not orbit, like literally moving, getting pulled, sucked towards it, but because there was another
Like we're going in.
there was another big planet that counterbalanced it, and I don't know
Okay.
how that plays a role in regards to water. But anyways,
Yeah.
this scientist lady, apparently you can tell there's like markers in the hydrogen of water
Okay.
that tell you whether or not that water is from space or not.
Seriously?
Yeah. So
How
they
cool
can
is
tell
that?
they can tell if it's like space water, right? So they can tell whether or not that
I'm going to write that down so I can Google that later. That's a rabbit hole I want to go find myself in.
so they can tell whether or not that water came from space, basically. And then there's like some other marker that I don't know if it tells whether or not the water was here originally, or this is a great episode of this podcast. Go listen to it.
Right?
But she had a theory that there was water already here on the planet,
Right?
that it didn't necessarily come from a comet or from an
Mhm.
asteroid or something like that, that it was already here on the planet.
Yeah,
So she
that's
went
kinda what
down
I
to
thought.
like Antarctica,
Mm-hmm.
and apparently there's some old rocks down there, or old like lava flows that basically have been untouched since
Lava
know,
flows in Antarctica.
like super early times as far as the planet goes. So they've
Okay.
been there forever, untouched by man.
Okay.
She goes down there,
Uh-huh.
finds one of them, breaks off a chunk of it, analyzes it, and finds water crystals inside the rock. Okay. But it's not like frozen water. It's not like ice.
Okay.
The way that she described it was like green glass or something. Like there's some, essentially what it is. And like, let's see if I can butcher this as much as I've done the entire episode already.
Well, it's really how we create like mystery so they go and listen to it.
Right. So,
Yeah.
so
We're doing them a
essentially
favor.
the theory that she has is hydrogen
Mm-hmm.
gets released from the sun, which they know.
Okay.
Like one of the things that comes flying off the sun is hydrogen. Obviously, we know hydrogen is one of the components to water.
Mm-hmm.
So
Is it the
hydrogen,
first one? Is it the H in
It
the
is.
H2O?
It
Look at me
is.
being smart. That was
and the
sarcasm.
2 stands for
There's two.
trouble.
Trouble? Oh, okay. Either-
So hydrogen comes off the sun.
Uh-huh.
Floating around in space are like chunks of silica or silicon, or like basically like chunks of rock that are comprised of oxygen and silica, or I don't know,
I don't know this.
chunks
Yeah.
of rock flying around.
Cool.
The hydrogen hits them
Uh-huh.
and clears out the silicon or the
Okay.
silica, whatever is the correct pronunciation or the correct element or whatever,
I don't know what to correct you.
bonds with the bonds with the oxygen,
And then we
and then that
have
rock comes down. So now we have rocks.
uh-huh.
Basically what she's articulating is that water is present inside rocks.
Inside rocks.
And then over the course of time, history, all the different like pressure, magma, blah, blah, blah. Eventually
We
that
have
water.
oceans though. How does
Yeah,
that
That means lots,
I don't know how to
right?
my brain's struggling with that one.
Yeah. And I wish I could clarify things, but obviously that's not the case.
Yeah.
I just found it super fascinating.
Yeah, that's definitely fascinating. That's something interesting for sure.
So it's a new theory.
Uh-huh.
I don't know how new. Maybe it's not a new theory.
Well, they
but-
always say that the water that we have on Earth is all that we have on Earth. Like we're not getting more. Like that debunks that.
right?
Yeah. If that, but I still like I'm trying to like
So we have,
wrap my head around. I don't
like,
quite understand it.
the idea is that there's water in the rocks.
Okay.
But don't think of it like the water that, like, it's not liquid, it's not a gas, it's not a
It's a solid, but it's not ice. It's not a solid. It's not a liquid, gas, or
it's like
solid.
in a mineral state almost.
Okay.
And then somehow through magic, this lady was from Hogwarts.
Right? And she went and found green minerals that were actually watered in an untouched volcano in Antarctica.
Yes. Not
Okay.
an untouched volcano,
I thought that's what you
a
said.
lava flow.
Lava flow from an okay.
So like dried up
Way different.
dried up lava.
Dried up lava, a
Right.
lava flow. So, okay.
The fascinating thing
Magma.
is because like for the past however long that science has been around, we have thought we're so special and then this planet is so unique. and such a rare thing because it has water.
In this solar system.
Right. So it's like the fact that water exists here is such almost a miracle. Hence, This is why life. And then that means that throughout the rest of space and everything else, that there's probably not a lot of life that exists.
Yeah. We're the only ones that have life.
Because
Earth
of all the unique things that have to take place in order for water to get onto this planet. But her theory provides another lens to look through where water would be way more common, way more like available through this means that they suspect, which means it's probably in a lot of places everywhere. Also, including the moon. Turns out that
water on the moon.
They found the same
find the same markers?
The same water marker things in moon rocks. So there's water on the moon.
See, so God is water. So I love this.
Isn't that cool?
I love this. Yeah, I'm very curious to learn more about this. This is like,
I'll share the episode with you.
Yeah, do it. This is a pop in of my brain that's like, I wonder what else can come from this.
Like I said, it is Unexplainable as the podcast, and then episode is Origins. How did Earth get its water? Let's see if it mentions that lady's name. I'll send it to you. I'm right here on the page.
Do it.
So yeah, what's the God theory about water?
It's just a thing that goes over. Like I don't have it all. I won't remember it all because I suck at retelling. My brain does not work in where I can retell with accuracy. The pressure is too much.
Pressure is on.
Ooh, wow! I'm totally freezing up. I can feel my face like getting like my cheeks.
Take a deep breath. You're safe. Everything's fine. Okay, stop talking.
It's just a thing that went around. It's just like one of those like feel good things that went around, reels that were done of it, and talking about how like water holds vibration and water holds like how you speak to water. They have those studies. I can't remember what they're called right now, or where they showed like the crystals from it and how like you talk negatively to water and how it shapes, and you talk positively and how it shapes. And then it goes into like how like in the womb we are surrounded by water, and how just all this creation, when it comes down, it washes away. There was this whole thing, and I don't have it all. Just go look it up. But it was like talking about all how life goes, the cycles of life, and how even like the communicating with the water brings its element, and then it heals you. And just like, so it was just like the God is water, and coming through your tear. It was just, I'm doing a terrible job, and I'm really sorry to all the listeners out there.
You're not doing a terrible job.
I want to move on.
I think water is fascinating.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's crazy that we
I wish I could find it.
Go from breathing water, right? We're inside the belly.
Yeah, that was part of it.
Breathing it. And then suddenly, like that alone, what is that? Like to me, I hear that and I'm like, oh, we're amphibious. Like we're totally amphibians. Right? So are you researching it now?
I'm trying. I'm nervous. See, there's a whole God is Water TikTok video.
There you go.
Instagram. So go check it out because it was cool, and you don't have to hear me try to explain it. You can just go hear it for yourself and be moved, or not.
Or not.
Or not. You get to feel whatever you feel. Just don't ask me to retell it. I can speak what I'm feeling in the moment, but to retell,
yeah.
No, I suck at that.
I had this other interesting thing that I watched the other day that I was going to share with you.
You are just full of fascinating stuff today. Let's bring it, Craig.
What can I say? This was Esther Perel and some other, I don't know if it was like some other psychologist, or I don't know what Esther is. What is she? She's a therapist. Anyways, I think she was just on this like panel. It was like a panel discussion. And the lady that was interviewing her, and I apologize, I don't remember her name or have any specifics about her at all.
I forgive you.
She was talking about how detrimental TikTok and Instagram and everything is in regards to kids. Well, obviously, that like we could end the sentence right there, and everybody's like, "Yeah, duh, we know that already." But the diagnosis of all these issues like anxiety and depression and ADD, and so kids are coming away like they're watching something and coming away with this impression that they now have anxiety. So they're self-diagnosing based off of Reels and TikToks.
Mm-hmm.
And what it's creating, I guess what they're experiencing in like the mental health field
Mm-hmm.
is like this massive, almost, it's not like scapegoating, but like not the concept, but what they're experiencing is like massive misdiagnosis. Like they're not actually, you don't actually have anxiety, or you don't actually have depression. When it comes to like that, what's the book where they, like you have to fit all of these criteria to fit into the diagnosis, right?
That lovely book that anybody that is in mental, like we'll use the Body Keeps Score guy talks about it. I'm forgetting his name at the moment. And how completely like unhealthy that book is.
Yeah.
And how they have a panel of people who decide if this information and that you bring to them, that you present, is something that they deem is actually a thing. And it's usually just like guys. I don't know if it's still the case. So it's basically a voting committee of whether or not it makes the book. And when people don't want
Physician's
change,
Guide reference.
yes,
maybe.
yes. And when people don't want change, if they don't like it, like how much they've had to like fight just to get things that are so common knowledge now in practice before they're like, no, we don't agree with that. We don't want that in there, because most of it will just come from Freudian teachings and they don't want to expand beyond that. So yes, that book.
So they're having this issue where kids are basically self-diagnosing and then like not, like I'm trying to think of how to phrase it. So self-diagnosing and then just like relying upon that as an excuse, when the reality is they don't have anxiety. It's like the whole thing of like recognition of life is hard, actually.
Yeah.
And you're going to have difficult times, and you're going to go through difficult things, and you're going to have emotional ups and downs, and you're going to have different like levels of all of these kind of experiences over the course of your life. And if you just stay in the mindset that, oh, this is it, this is what I've got, then you're discounting all the like the beauty that comes in with learning how to go through those experiences and how to have those experiences and how to like the internal self fortitude to kind of strive in life and survive and all of these kind of different things. I know you're hearing this. I can tell by the way your body language is and by the way you're responding. And
is my body language communicating?
It's communicating immensely to this man.
Did you learn that on TikTok? Because apparently
that has become very fine-tuned to your body language.
Let me see if I can change my tone.
Tone. So I am not doing this justice. Just like the podcast episode that I described about water on the moon.
What about the water is God theory? Like,
right?
How did I do?
You did that one really well.
Right?
That was super clear.
If anything here, we can do things justice completely upon the retelling. That's our skill.
My takeaway, because Esther responded as well, and she talked about the importance of being your...
What? What?
That was so subtle.
I'm sorry.
If you're listening, just hit the back 10 seconds. Like just rewind 30 seconds. And I'm going to replay what just happened. So Craig says, and then Esther responded, and Stephanie goes, mm-hmm. Tell me how you feel about Esther Perel, babe.
No, like finish this sentence. It's not how I feel about it. It's like where you're going with this.
So the importance of like learning how to navigate in the world based off of how hard the world is. And instead of getting help and support and like creating community and the importance of community in kind of, navigating all of these challenges, they're finding that these kids are just almost like wearing it like a, not like an excuse and a bad, like they're stopping the process by limiting themselves into thinking, I have anxiety. Now let's just treat that, as opposed to recognizing that maybe you are presenting with some anxious behaviors, but underneath all of those things, it's not quote unquote anxiety. It's more of yeah, like life is hard and we have to learn how to navigate it. And here's some tools and some skill sets and all those kind of things. But I also see the point of view where you're coming from.
I haven't said anything.
So let's move on.
I haven't said a word.
And I'll summarize.
No.
Anyway, Stephanie hates Esther Perel.
That is not. Oh my hell.
So tell me what you think. Don't go to your phone. What are you going to your phone
I'm already
for?
checking out of the conversation. I can see that point.
Mm-hmm.
I can see that point as being, of having some validity to it. I see that point as like, that is fair. It's like kids are putting these labels on. Okay. So I understand that there is a point of that. And I think that that point of view that they are sharing is highly toxic and hurtful. I think that so much time has been spent with being told what you feel is not valid, is not right, is not like, and you shouldn't be feeling these things. That whole like life is hard thing, suck it up, buttercup, is where, and now with these things coming out, people talking about it, because now there is a platform that, yeah, there is self-diagnosis is going on. And self-diagnosis is like, you could get it right and you could get it wrong. But the point of like what's going in is we are getting more information out there to people. Some of it's wrong, some of it's right. Not every symptom that somebody gets on and says they have means that you have it. Means that and also you're getting information that you didn't have before. So maybe. And healthcare providers are notorious for not listening to their patients. They will not listen. They already decide before, like they diagnose you based off anything that you bring. They're not listening to, and this is very prominent for women, and it's more like so much so for women of color. They are just not believed, not listened to. So, and then you have children who are immediately like diminished and they don't know what they're talking about. Listen to an adult. I've heard adults say, and these are like this woman is like, I value her opinion. I value her as a person. She is like, I don't know how else to describe it. Like, I totally value her.
Are you talking about somebody now in your
somebody
personal
now
life?
in personal life who said that same thing in regards to their child. You're not this. This person found, this child found their identity when it came through. They were seeing other people like them and they felt safe enough to be like, okay, yes, I can do like this. I can be me. And it's like, you're not this. You just think that because of TikTok. You're not. If you stop watching TikTok, you're like, you don't have this. You don't have this. I'm like, that's hurtful. That is saying that the child's reality, that person's reality is not real, and that they cannot trust themselves, and they need to trust what the adult, who is not that person, is telling them. And all these medical professionals out there that aren't liking this, because if people start taking that into their own hands and holding doctors and therapists accountable and saying, no, you're not listening to me. This is what's going on. I want this to be looked at. They want that control of it. And you do have medical professionals and therapists on there that are like, hey, we're listening. We're listening. So I think there's good and bad here, but to say that this is like putting information out there and allowing it to be something other than because your doctor says so. Like, we all know where that's gotten us in the West. So because your doctors say so, because this is safe, because you don't need this, because you need this for all these things, because you have this and all that. Now, letting people experience their life, finding what's resonating with them, and then connecting that, and then holding people accountable to hear them, I think is highly beneficial. So is there good and bad with it? Of course. But to have them saying, oh, this is wrong, life is just hard, what you're feeling isn't valid, I think that's terrible.
So
that's my opinion.
This brings up a lot, right?
Right? It totally does.
I think we got a lot here that we could unpack and talk about, and I want to. And I also like fully acknowledge that I did not do a good job explaining this 1.5-minute long video that I watched. So
I'm not mad at you.
I know you're not mad, and you're not mad. You're not even mad. You're
Not
just
even
passionate
mad.
about
I
it.
am passionate about it.
And I'm going to find it and I'll send it to you.
Okay.
And maybe I'll share it in the show notes. I probably won't.
Yeah.
Because I'll forget when it
We'll
comes
forget.
time to do the show notes. But if you follow Esther Pirelli, if you go follow her on any of her socials, I'm sure this video will pop up. It's a recent one. And she wasn't discrediting. She wasn't saying like, no, that's not what you feel. Right. She wasn't, I don't think the conversation was about discrediting people's feelings or emotions or what they're going through.
Okay.
I think the fear that they were bringing up, because that's very much what it was, right? Here's this fear that if people, if the generation of kids growing up right now learning about mental health issues from TikTok are learning those, like basically if you're learning about your mental health issues on TikTok, you are pigeonholing yourself into a box that doesn't allow for the full human experience of what it means to be alive. And that full human experience is something that you get from the world around you, from positive reinforcement through parents and community and like the collective. They talked about the collective aspect of us as society, like raising up this collective in the regards to how we approach and deal with all of these things that the world has. Like right now, there's a huge list of everything that's going on in the world that's like a lot to deal with. It's a lot to process, right? I mean, that list we all know. It's war, it's just this huge list of shit that goes on in this world that we are aware of, and we have to figure out how to navigate that. And the more that we can learn to navigate that together as a collective, as a whole, as well as like individually in our smaller family units and community and everything like that, the better off we are. And I think their fear is that kids are walking away now after learning about anxiety on TikTok with this lens of basically self-perspective, looking at themselves through that lens, where they only see themselves as, I have anxiety, and now they are going to miss out on this other big thing that is really not just beneficial, but necessary in a sense for kind of like a balanced, happy life in the world. So that's kind of the gist of how I interpreted everything that they were saying.
That's funny. I wonder like what the difference is here, because you're hearing that and I'm hearing medical gaslighting.
So
that's just like very interesting how like...
I want to pose a question to you.
You know what? When you're going to bring something like this on, just a thought.
Yeah.
So
do a little bit of work ahead of time.
No, I mean, like share this with me ahead of time so I can also watch it. So I'm giving my opinions on the video, not my opinions on your retelling. Because I'm very passionate about the perception that you're giving to me, and it might not. It's
not at all.
It might not be, or it would be the exact perception that I would have gained from, we don't know.
Yeah.
But I can, I'm speaking to the impression that I'm getting from your retelling.
We've been doing this podcast for 6+ years now. So maybe in year 10, we'll get that figured out.
Maybe. I know you're like, hey, I got this thing I've been waiting to talk about.
Right.
This minute clip, I could have watched that. I'd have scheduled that in my day. I could have done a minute. An hour, probably not. But a minute, I could have done it. Even if it was right before we hit play. Hold on. Because I can't do things till the very last minute, till the pressure's on.
But I have a question for you.
Okay.
Because all the stuff that you brought up about medical gaslighting and not listening to people and, thinking that basically sorry, I'm not getting emotional. I'm just burping.
I'm getting emotional. Excuse me, I'm not burping. It's because we're drinking Dr. Pepper.
Dr. Pepper, strawberries and cream.
Makes you
This episode is brought to you by...
How do you have good podcast etiquette?
Self-diagnosing. So as you were talking, a bunch of stuff started to light up in my head in this concept of is it beneficial for people to like, we'll just use this topic alone because it's not just mental health, right? It's in the, like, your physical health, your whatever you have going on with your body, like autoimmune issues, like all of these kind of different things that we deal with as humans, right? There's this huge spectrum of stuff. Yeah, but let's just keep it on mental health for the sake of this conversation and time, in a sense, right? We all know, hopefully we all know at this point that like mental health and the mental health system in this country and in the Western part of the world is very lacking across the board.
Yes.
And it's not something that is easily accessible. It's not like help and support isn't easily accessible. The stigma attached to it, like,
and
it's
not affordable either.
It's not affordable.
So even it's difficult to access, and it's not accessible to most people.
Yeah, there's just a huge issue when it comes to mental health awareness, mental health help, assistance. So it's safe to assume, or safe to say, that there's a big problem in this country with mental health. And I can see the issue of people learning about mental health issues or neural issues, right? Like neurodivergency or autism or ADD, all of these kind of mental issues, learning about them via TikTok or Instagram Reels, and suddenly diagnosing themselves. I can see that as being an issue.
Yeah.
And I can also see it as a huge, massive benefit, because suddenly we are having awareness around all of these issues that everybody feels the effects of. Everybody is on this spectrum, regardless of whether or not you are, regardless of even if you have like mental health support or therapists or whatever. And so my question to you that I want to pose is, when it comes to like, think about you in your life and kind of what you've experienced. Do you think it's necessary to get like certified diagnosis from a psychologist or a therapist? Do you think that's necessary for somebody to help them? Or do you think it's just as beneficial if they go down the rabbit hole on TikTok and decide that they have anxiety?
That's not an easy question. It really depends on the circumstance and the spirit. Because even like we're just talking about mental health, but there are so many different levels, right? You have between like non-functioning, high functioning, low functioning, all of these different ways, the severity of the way that it impacts you. There are severities and cases where a certified diagnosis is needed, so that for those that need medication, that have that works for them. Not everybody does, but for that works for them. Obviously, somebody who is trained and qualified for that. Now, that doesn't mean that the person that's trained and qualified giving you medication is like serving you any bit of justice, because so many are doing like that for big pharma kickbacks. They're getting paid for that. They're having all this, and it doesn't really matter. All they care about is prescribing it. So they're getting, I'm not saying that just because somebody can certifiably qualify you and label you as having this doesn't mean that that's a healthy perspective. But there are good doctors out there. There are people out there that having that diagnosis does benefit you, because it is leading you towards getting the help that you need and getting the treatment that you need. And there's other ones that you don't need that. You just don't need that. You don't need somebody telling you this is the box you fit into and this is what you should or shouldn't be doing. That can just be information for you. And like, I know how to, like, this is the expansion that I give myself. Like, people see it as a box, and I see it as an expansion. I see it as breaking out of the box, because instead of being like, this is the mold that you need to fit into, this is how society is supposed to act, this is how you're supposed to think and feel and behave in these circumstances, and you're not fitting into that because you're wrong, because your behavior is wrong, because your thoughts are wrong, because you're not applying yourself, all of the blah, blah, blahs that doesn't fit to the spectrum. It only fits to try and make like the conformity of people I think that when you have that yourself, that awareness, you're breaking free of that, because now you're not constantly feeling like you are broken, that you are just wrong, that if you could just do this, then you wouldn't be wrong, that you are a problem, and being like, whoa, oh, that makes sense. This is how my brain works. I connect with that. Finally, I can take a breath. That connects for me. I don't need a diagnosis, but I have that awareness. And maybe you need accommodations. And there are workplaces and places that only accept accommodations from a healthcare provider. And so then that diagnosis would benefit you. But even having the awareness that you have beforehand to go into a healthcare provider and for them to listen to you, right? Instead of being like, no, it's not this or it's this, but to hear your concerns and for them to take that into account. Like, oh, that's interesting. Let's look at that. Let's look at that together and maybe find together that this is where you're at. Maybe it's this and something else. Maybe it's nothing to do with this that you haven't even seen, but to have somebody listen to you because you've got this, even without the diagnosis that you're bringing it to, and they're hearing you and they're working with you, and then you get the diagnosis. So that's why I don't think it's too big of a question, I think, for me. It can help and it cannot. Can it put you into a box of where you're like, well, this is it. This is all I have in life because I can't do anything because of this? Yeah, it can. But that's a choice. As much as it can free you.
Go ahead.
I was just like, I don't think that this can be a situational answer. I think it's an individual answer for each individual person. And to put a situational label on it that doesn't work. That just doesn't work.
I think that there's some things that stand out to me that are issues, and it's not just in the context of this conversation. I think it's bigger societal issues where we think that because you are a doctor or a medical professional or a licensed clinical social worker, or you went through college and you got your degree in this topic and now you are quote unquote a therapist or psychologist, that somehow makes your perception of your reality and what you're like. So all of that concept and idea that somehow you know better because you went through this experience, or that we're relying upon just that label alone. Like if you are the therapist, or if you are the psychologist, or if you are the doctor, the medical professional, then your diagnosis or your label that you place on somebody, or however you see something, that's the gold standard.
Right.
And then everything outside of that is not deemed worthy or valid or a possibility because it doesn't fit this, So if you don't get diagnosed, then you can't really be X, Y, or Z, right? If you don't actually go to the doctor and get something confirmed by a medical professional or a mental health professional, then it's not real. And the only validity that we're giving is to this group of people that have, invested money into their education and gone and sat through classes. But we know good and goddamn well that those people are human and make mistakes all the time, and also are operating off of information that is old, like 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years old. So you're basing, like society bases a whole bunch of stuff off of like the agreement that these people know more or know better than the rest of us do because they've gone through this process. And that's such a big issue. Yeah. Like the fact is those people it's not to discredit the profession, it's not to discredit the individuals, but it's not so black and white. It's not so clear cut. And it's not allowing for like the full spectrum of, I think about this. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I just want to add to that before we spin off, because like that is so true. And like a human cannot know everything.
Yeah.
So like these doctors that have this, that are giving, they can't, like, there's a part where, there is negligence involved, there is ego involved. And then there's a part like, you cannot expect them to know everything. That is too much. And even in their field, you have this field, there's experts in their fields, right? But there are so many branches. You don't have that all. You do not have that all. And it's, from what I have seen, now, not in that field, just from like what my perspective and from what I've seen, is not only is it like, are they expected to know everything? But it's not just by like us. It's not just by like patients. It's not just by people. It's by like like, I don't know what they, like, what's the word? I want to say like members, but that's wrong. Like people that are also in their field. It's like this shaming thing of where you're expected to know this. And if you don't, then, you know, you're less than, you're not as good at. So you like, they're doubling down on things and doubling down. And people are saying like, well, here's this diagnosis that is incorrect. But because it came from a doctor, like you said, it's there, but it's somebody who doesn't even have that information, but they're able to give this diagnosis. So like the human error allowance, the human ability of, you can't have all of these, you can't have all that information.
Yeah.
Like it's just impossible. It's not, you're lacking. You're not a failure. You just like, nobody can have all of that information. Nobody can get it right. So working together, and even just like the ability to just say, I don't know, let's find out together, is so powerful.
I don't think we really give credit to the uniqueness of each individual human experience.
Yeah.
Because yeah, there's a ton of similarities, right? There's so many things that are common throughout humans and relationships, and you know how people are shaped and formed. All of those things are very, very true. And then also everybody is uniquely themselves based off of, you know, a set of criteria that is so variable, right? Who your parents are, what they experienced, who your grandparents were, what they experienced, where were they born, what was going on, what time period, you know, how the stars were aligned. Like there's just a vast amount of influences and factors to take into what somebody's actual human experience is going to be based off of their perspective. Because we know about the placebo effect.
Yes.
So even though you
How wonderful is that?
Like the fact that you have the belief or the idea doesn't necessarily mean that you have the thing.
True.
However, that doesn't matter if your perception is that you have the thing.
And vice versa.
So there's another thing, correct, vice versa. Hold on. I don't want to let this thought go because there was something else. Oh, the other big thing that I think I would really like to see talked about more and like change in the scope of, you know, this topic is the idea that it is almost like static or black and white. Like if you're diagnosed, you know, I think about myself in general, or not in general. I think about myself. Like in my 20s, I went to therapy, and we've talked about this on the podcast before, where I went to therapy and eventually got to the point where like it was a licensed clinical social worker. So he technically couldn't diagnose me with anything, but he basically said, yeah, I think you have some form of bipolar, like you're cyclothymic, or cyclothymia is the diagnosis. Had I taken that information and just that then became my identity of what I have, right? Well, I need to get treatment for this, and I need to get medication for this, and so on and so forth. And there's nothing wrong with going down that path, but it doesn't allow for the variability of, once again, the human experience, where that's a snapshot of where you're at that moment in your life.
Correct.
And
for that circumstance, yeah.
And that changes. So that quote unquote diagnosis it's not a lifelong diagnosis. Yeah. It's not something that you're going to be struggling with for the rest of your life. It's just a momentary snapshot of where you're at in your life. And
this is what we're dealing with right now.
Yes. And I hear the peanut gallery. I can hear the alternative where it's like, no, it's a lifelong diagnosis. Like there are some people that firmly believe that once they are diagnosed with like let's take alcoholism. Yeah. Where alcoholism is something that, you know, gets viewed through some lenses as a disease. And it's like, once you identify as an alcoholic, you can have 20 years sober, but you still, identify yourself as an alcoholic or a recovering alcoholic. I'm not judging that, but I'm also saying that that is keeping yourself in a box, in a place that doesn't allow for the fact that you may have struggled with addiction and alcohol during certain portions of your life, and now you don't any longer. Or you may have fallen on the spectrum of anxiety or bipolar during certain periods of time in your life, and later on in life you don't. And if you are looking through the lens of I'm bipolar, then you're always going to be bipolar, as opposed to, oh, I'm experiencing this right now and it may continue for the rest of my life, but more than likely it's going to shift and change as I shift and change and grow and I have different human experiences. So it should be less about the diagnosis that then gives you a stamp and says, this is you, and more about what are you actually experiencing in the moment throughout your life, right? From time period to time period. And let's start to process those things and look at those things, and less about the diagnosis and more about the actual present moment human experience of how do we actually, once again, like back to the Esther Perel conversation that I butchered, like how do we navigate the human experience? Because it's fucking hard.
It's so hard.
It's so hard. And just sticking a label on something, whether you get that diagnosis or you self-diagnosis, and now suddenly, like how many people do we know that are like, we do this thing where you and I both have like been, go ahead.
Well, yeah, no. I don't want that to go, because what you're saying is so important. It's like, just because you are given this diagnosis doesn't mean that this is your life sentence. Like that is such a thing. And we're not invalidating those that are like, no, this is what I have struggled with. And I like my mom, my dad, my brother, whatever, until the end. That's completely valid.
Yes.
But how many, like, we'll just use like counselor's the easiest one to go to. So we'll just use like that. How many people have been diagnosed with stage 4, end of life, you're done, and they're like, no, I'm not, and they beat it, or saying like, you've got a week, and they're like on year 6 and they're still going. Like these things are and also it's not like I don't want anybody to hear that if you do not overcome a diagnosis, then you're doing something wrong.
Correct.
That's definitely not what we're saying. But like there's just more than what a person tells you. There's more. And the person may get it completely right, but they may get it completely wrong. And you never know what is happening from one day to the next. And so to allow the possibility of change and difference and growth and even like it's a sliding scale, like it goes all over the place. So I love that you're like saying that. I agree with that completely.
Right. We just have to allow for that change to take place, for things to actually shift and change. And that doesn't always mean that they're going to shift and change in what we would label or classify as a positive way.
Yeah.
It might get worse.
It might.
You're next thing you know, you go from being anxious to being bipolar to being schizophrenic to, being committed, and then back again, starting like it's just a huge spectrum.
Yeah.
And I think that's the bigger thing that I would like to see happen, is less about, is it like, should people be diagnosing themselves off of TikTok, or, is there a detriment to that? Of course, right? It's pros and cons both ways. And less reliant upon a system that has proven time and time again to be faulty. Like the reality is the mental health and the medical system isn't foolproof. And they'll admit it. They'll be like, yes, of course. And this is the gold standard that we're relying upon.
And this is the I know better. If the situation wasn't so faulty,
right? If it fucking worked,
people wouldn't be coming up with TikToks and trying to get help beyond.
Exactly. Like if the system in place that we're supposed to be relying upon was so beneficial and so healthy, then why the hell are we all so fucked up?
And the system's the one that's saying, don't do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Give us another option.
Yeah. The other option is trying to get help through the mental health system that's in place. Obviously, that's not working.
Right.
So I think it's a really beneficial thing that we do have social media now, and we have the ability to see all of these different human experiences, and that they're getting talked about, and it's sparking interest. And like, that would be the big thing that I hope, if you're listening to this, like the big takeaway is, if you watch a TikTok video and suddenly you have self-diagnosed yourself with anxiety, there's nothing wrong with that, but allow for that to be your experience today. And maybe tomorrow it'll be different, or next year it'll be different.
Yeah.
And, you know, that's like the big underlying caveat is all of these things aren't permanent. Like, there is no permanence.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
And I was just thinking of like the ableist mindset that I had too with that, of like, find somebody that will listen. Like, if you don't, like, there are doctors out there that will listen. There are therapists out there that will listen that aren't in that box. And I'm like, keep trying until you find someone. But that is only for people who have the financial means to keep trying. So then you have another spectrum of who are getting like assistance, right? These are the only healthcare they're allowed to see is in this little box. And even that is still enabled. There's so many people that don't even have assistance and that don't have the financial. And they're like, all that would be great. I don't have access to anything.
Right.
And so like, that's a problem. So even just that of having, maybe they've seen something on social media that gives them some tools, it gives them some skills. Otherwise, they do not have access for. They don't have the ability to go to a therapist, even a shitty therapist or a shitty doctor. It's just not there.
Yeah.
So there's so much that needs to be, I don't know. I don't know that it needs to be changed, but I would sure like it to be different.
And this makes me also think about, like, every problem that we perceive as a problem also has just as many, like, so if we're looking at this thing on TikTok and kids self-diagnosing themselves as a problem and a big issue that we need to address, there's equally big, useful, beneficial, life-changing, impactful things taking place as well,
Right.
that are equally not detrimental, but actually really beneficial and healthy. And, you know, it's not one or the other. Like,
It's not.
That's one thing that we've learned on our healing
Right.
journey, is it gets to be both.
Right. That's
Right.
so funny.
It gets to be both.
It gets to be both. Social media is toxic and it brings people lower self-esteem. It causes anxiety and like feeling
So
shame
many
and
issues.
bullying. And there's so much information and it brings
together,
like,
and it
right?
sparks conversations and change, and you're seeing like new ways of, oh, I didn't even think of, I mean,
Right.
how many things have we learned? You know, I'm today years old now, and I've learned that that's how the microwave is supposed to function properly. Oh my gosh,
Wait,
nobody
we
ever
could do
told me
this?
that, right?
Right. There's so much out there.
There's
And
this
it's
one
the same
account-
thing. It's just different perspectives.
Yeah.
But we're all looking at the same thing. So nobody is wrong because that's just the view that they have looking at it. So we got to allow for other people to have other views.
Yes. Don't be so closed-minded, Esther Perel.
What were you just saying?
I was just going to comment on like, there's this other account that we've started to follow where all it is it's like this dad, some old guy that is giving you all this dad advice
I
of like,
love that account.
this is how you patch a hole. This is how you
I was watching
fix
that
a sink.
today.
This is how you know, all of those things.
He does
that
something
are,
like how you tie a tie, like all these things.
Yeah.
I love that.
so wonderful.
Yes.
right? Such a huge benefit.
Right?
Yeah. So we can't throw the baby out with the bathwater.
That is a
And if you're throwing babies, you definitely got a problem. You're definitely.
that's not.
I'm
yeah.
diagnosing you as a, what's that personality disorder where they are, you know, the psychopaths. You're a psychopath if you're throwing babies. So,
Or yeah.
baby, I'm certified to diagnose people.
You're sure? I'm like, let's just get help.
We've been hosting this podcast for 6 years. That gives me, like, I'm tenured now, and I can diagnose people with all sorts of issues.
Isn't tenure like 10 years?
I don't know. I missed that.
I might be wrong.
I missed that on TikTok. I didn't watch that TikTok video. Let's move on to the question this week.
Okay.
So every week we answer a question.
Yeah,
You
here we
can
go.
submit your questions to info@energyislove.love, or you can just message us directly via any social media platform you find us. We are on all of those platforms that we just got done talking about, and we give mental health advice, and we talk about all sorts of different things. So take our advice with a grain of salt.
Is it advice, or like we're sharing our perspective? I don't know that it's advice.
Sometimes
We're sharing our perspectives, and if it resonates for you, then there you go. But it's not like, oh, this is what you should do, because everybody's different. And what works for us may be the last thing that you need.
Right.
And what works for us may be the very thing that you were looking for.
We might have the key that will unlock the door that you've been butting your head against trying to figure out your shit.
We might. And we might be, like you said, the last thing that you need. It's all about perspective. Trust yourself. Does this feel good for you? Does this align with you? Or does it feel like this does not serve you? Like, trust yourself beyond all. Listen to you.
Yeah, you've got the answers.
You do.
Okay, question.
I'm trying to like shift gears.
Okay, shift gears.
Okay.
Watermelon. Susie sells by the, that's a terrible one. Don't do S's on a podcast.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. Do I have to communicate my boundaries to the person I'm setting them with? Do I have to communicate the boundaries? From what I'm understanding, do I have to communicate the boundaries that I'm setting to the people that I'm setting, the reason that I'm setting them? Or like, if I have this new boundary, do I need to communicate it to the person who is in the space of it, affecting it?
It's a really good question.
That's what I'm understanding.
It's a hard question, right?
Yeah.
When it comes time to start setting boundaries with people in your life, it's very, very difficult for most people, especially to set healthy boundaries. So like right off the bat, do you have to inform the person that you're setting the boundary?
That you're setting this boundary.
I think it depends on the relationship.
Agreed.
And what I mean by that is like, who is this person to you? Like if it's your mailman, it kind of depends, right? Like if you want to set a boundary with the mailman, they might not necessarily need to know about it. But if it's your partner, then I would say, yeah, you definitely need to communicate the boundary. If it's like this sounds terrible, but the closer you are to the person, meaning the more important that relationship is, the more significance that they have to you, I think that indicates the more of the importance that you need to place on communicating that boundary to that person. And there are some caveats to that, right? Just because that person may be important to you, communicating that boundary to them may not be a safe thing to do, right? Mm-hmm. It may cause more issues and it may be more detrimental. And truthfully, I mean, a boundary is something that we set up in order to create safety for ourselves, right? And that's a very important thing. And if by communicating a boundary to somebody who actually isn't safe, oftentimes that's not going to really be a good idea. It may be something that needs to be done later on, once you've had some practice, I think maybe. I don't know. What do you think?
I love your answer. Like, it totally depends on the situation. It depends on, like you said, how close this person is to you, but what type of relationship you do have with that person and what you're like moving towards in that relationship. Because if it is, as you mentioned, a safety issue and you are setting these boundaries and you are not safe, or you are no longer participating in whatever behaviors we're taking and you are ending the relationship, I don't feel like you need to. Like, if you are like, these are now my boundaries, I'm taking care of myself and I'm out of this situation, or if I communicate this boundary, they're going to use it against me and hurt me. If you're not safe, then no, you do not need to. Having those boundaries does not mean that you have to broadcast them to them. You get to uphold those boundaries. Those boundaries are for you. And if it is a relationship that is close to you, it doesn't mean a romantic relationship, but it is somebody that is relationship close to you, that you are setting this boundary and you want to keep moving forward in this relationship.
Yeah, if you want to maintain the relationship.
Then of course you do. Because they can't know if you don't communicate it. And it's like, if, for instance, an example is like Craig has a new boundary. Craig comes up with something that has been going on in our relationship that does not work for him anymore. It does not feel, it doesn't matter whether it's safe or whatever things go, it doesn't work for him anymore. And now he has created this boundary for himself. As his partner, I absolutely want to know what that boundary is because I want to honor it as long as it works within my boundaries, right? And if it doesn't align with my boundaries, then that is a conversation that him and I have together about maybe we are in a new place. But as his partner, if he's like, this is my boundary, I want to honor his boundary. So I want to know about it so I don't keep violating this boundary that I don't even know about, that is causing him more and more harm and that is going to end to the split of our relationship. But this is also coming from a healthy standpoint. And not all relationships are at that level.
Which
right?
is probably why you're setting some boundaries.
Right? That's probably why you're setting some boundaries. And so even just like finding like the way to communicate this is like a whole other topic, right? And finding how you can communicate that and communicating clearly using I statements and how you feel and what this boundary is for yourself. Just keep in mind, like, I am choosing this because it is important to me and I want to feel this. And it's not these are your responsibilities that you need to now do. Your boundaries aren't orders for somebody else. They are clarifiers for you. They are about like you and not what somebody else has to do.
The actions you're taking. The
actions you're taking, which doesn't mean that it's not, it's how they choose to show up in that space. Are they honoring your boundaries or are where they at in life? It doesn't work for them. But boundaries aren't a control mechanism for somebody else. It is very much what you're setting for yourself.
There's a distinction here that I think also needs to be spoken to is you can set a boundary and you can communicate that boundary to the person, especially like we said, if it's a relationship that you want to maintain and you want to kind of cultivate a healthier relationship with this person. You can set that boundary without needing to explain yourself. You don't need to explain why you're setting the boundary or the reasons for the boundary. That is something that we can like do away with. You can set the boundary and you can clearly state this is what's happening moving forward for me. You don't need to explain why. That's not your responsibility to explain your boundary to the other person. Communicating the new boundary or the change in the relationship for whatever reason, especially if you're maintaining that relationship, is kind of a key point. But we don't need to explain why. It's okay to just say, this is my new boundary and leave it. And that's a really challenging thing to do because we feel like we have to explain why. We have to justify setting this new boundary. We have to justify and explain why I've decided to do this thing. You don't. You just don't. It's healthy for you, and that's enough, right? You want the new boundary or you want to make the change, that's enough. You don't need to explain why. The other thing that I want to mention.
That was such a good distinction. That was like the most important distinction.
Excuse me. See if I can come up with, I had another thought that, boundary. It's gone.
Dang it.
That's okay.
Sorry.
You didn't do anything wrong. Oh, here it is. It came back. See, we just had to wait long enough. A good way to practice boundaries. This is like the precursor to setting a boundary with somebody else in your life is practice boundary setting with yourself and just get comfortable in saying, I'm going to, like, for example, let's see if I can come up with one because we do this all the time individually, babe, where like it's a perspective shift of looking at how you're loving yourself and how you're kind of self-disciplined and you're starting to do things in a different way. And like, let's say you want to get up by 8:00 in the morning. That's a great day if you're sleeping in until 8, but you have a hard time doing that. So you can set a boundary for yourself and say, every day I'm going to be out of bed by 8:00, or every day I'm going to make my bed after I get out of bed. Like that is a self-disciplined practice that you can implement, which in essence is honoring this desire and this thing, wanting to have your life look and feel a different way and setting this new boundary for yourself. And you can just practice those tiny little boundaries within the scope of just you and your relationship with yourself and get some confidence and, some practice communicating boundaries, because you can communicate that to yourself, right? You can practice what that looks like to yourself. I want to do this, and this is why. And then that's a really good way, I think, to start cultivating some kind of the muscles when it comes to setting boundaries with people outside of yourself, right? All the relationships that we have in life. But anything else that you want to add to it?
Yeah, that alone right there is how I learned to start setting boundaries, because so many times I wouldn't be able to, either I had no boundaries or I wouldn't be able to set them until it was like extreme before I could. I would like violate my boundaries over and over and over and over again because I didn't know how to keep them for myself. So I did not have practice. I only practiced not having boundaries and violate. So those little steps, those little things of setting boundaries for yourself, just little ones. It's not like, don't go crazy right off the bat. Or like, I'm gonna eat clean. I'm gonna get up at 5 every morning. I'm gonna go to the gym. I'm not gonna raise my voice. You know, you set this whole list of things as just setting yourself up. Just like pick one, start small, because all of those little actions, like they build and build. But doing that, starting small, I have started cultivating trust within myself. So I am now able to trust myself that I am keeping my word to myself, that I am keeping my boundaries. And that practice has given me the confidence and the skills and just like the practice in general to have boundaries outside. And it's easier to keep because I'm cultivating that trust and that self-love by holding those boundaries for me, that now I can express them out to the world. And as a ripple effect, you feel safer when you know my boundaries. When you don't know where my boundaries are, or if I'm violating my own boundaries by going with something that doesn't sit right, you never feel safe in a relationship with me because you don't know what I'm really like, what my boundaries are and what feels good. And so how do you like trying to set yours and trying to set mine? It's just like this unsafety. But when I'm like, no, this is a boundary, like, you know where that is. It's not a guessing game. It's not, and you get to choose whether you honor that, and same. So yeah, stand up practicing with yourself so you can, like, I love that. That's like my favorite. Get me excited, hyped up. Like, set a boundary with yourself that like first thing in the morning, you're going to drink a half a glass of water. Like, make it simple and keep it, because that creates so much momentum and trust within yourself. It's just, thank you for saying that. Yes, do that. That is advice. Do that one.
Again, you can submit any questions anytime. Send them to us, info@energyislove.love, or message us on any social media platform. Our favorite one's Instagram. So message us on Instagram. We'll find you regardless of where you send them. But thank you for tuning into this episode, everybody. Hopefully it got you thinking. If it did spark some things in your mind, feel free to share those with us as well. We love engagement and interaction and hearing about how the podcast affects you. If you're a fan of the podcast, do us a big old solid. That sounded like you're taking a shit or something else, but do us a favor. Do us a favor and like this podcast wherever you listen, subscribe, and then take the 30 seconds to leave us a 5-star review if you think this podcast is awesome. We would love to see those as well. And that helps the podcast. So if you're wanting a way to contribute and help this podcast reach more people, that's a way that you can do it. So have a beautiful, beautiful day.